To kick us off, we have our second core session, Firms and Transformation, the Macro-Micro Mismatch in ASEAN. Whilst economic growth in ASEAN has remained strong, equity returns have been more mixed, challenging preconceived notions. This session seeks to explore what explains this gap, what industry barriers, structural challenges, or market dynamics hinder firms. But most importantly, how overcoming these unlock not just greater productivity for firms, but value for its people. So ladies and gentlemen, we are pleased to invite Dato Jenn Weng, co-founder, president, and group CEO, Vitrox Corporation Berhad; Jenny Lee, senior managing partner of Granite Asia; Novan Amirudin, group CEO of CIMB Group Holdings Berhad; and to moderate this session, Vishal Agarwal, the co-head of private markets and head of Southeast Asia and South Asia at Khazanah. Over to you, Vishal.
Thanks. Thank you all for joining us. I hope you had a great lunch. Caffeine's kicking in, I hope. So today we have an exciting and relevant topic to debug, the macro-micro mismatch in ASEAN, right? ASEAN's macroeconomic performance has been strong, yet investment returns have been mediocre, to say the least. In short, good growth story, but middling investment story. Now, what drives this disconnect, right? Is it industry barriers? Is it the market size or scaling up issues? Maybe a gap in entrepreneurial innovation, or maybe even the business history, which is by and large family businesses with state-owned enterprises, right? So this session, we will delve into the factors behind ASEAN's markets, unpacking its challenges while also exploring pockets of opportunities that we can leverage to unlock returns, not just at the macro level, but also at the micro level. So today, I'm delighted to be joined by our three panelists. We have a banker, an investor, and a founder to help us navigate this topic. So first and foremost, I'll introduce Jenny Lee. Jenny is a senior managing partner of Granite Asia. As a jet engineer, amazing, right? Jet engineer turned VC investor, okay? She has seen a lot in this region with more than a 25-year track record in investing and has backed some of the most iconic businesses, including Xiaomi, Kingsoft, and Xpeng. She has led 20 IPOs up to date across 5 different global exchanges and has delivered numerous exits via M&A, right? So she's here to provide a unique investor perspective on ASEAN mismatches in terms of geofactors versus returns and the challenges that an investor faces in the region, right? Next up, we have Dato Chu. Dato Chu is the founder, president, and CEO of Vitrox Corporation Berhad. He is a leading figure in Malaysia's E&E hub in Penang, where he founded the company almost 25 years ago to become the leading global provider of innovative automated vision inspection systems for the semiconductor and electronics industries. I hope I got that right. He has won several awards, including EVA Entrepreneur of the Year in 2022, and the company was featured in the Forbes Asia Best Under $1 Billion list a few times. So he's here to share his perspective as a successful entrepreneur, having navigated through the ASEAN's challenges and risks in the past decades, right? Last but not the least, we have Novan. Novan Amirudin is, as you all know, is the CEO of CIMB Group Berhad, a leading bank in Malaysia and ASEAN with a presence across 10 countries. He is an ASEAN specialist with experience of over 2 decades in banking, having based out of Malaysia, Indonesia, and Singapore. He's here to share his unique perspective as a seasoned banker, having observed multiple steady ants and bold grasshoppers in the ASEAN over the past decades. So ladies and gentlemen, please help me welcoming our dear panelists for the session. So Novan, I'll start with you first, right? Now, credit penetration and stability says a lot about the health and prospects of a country. How is ASEAN doing in that regard?
Well, thank you, Vishal and Khazanah, for having me here today. Sure. When we look at credit penetration, I would say it's been largely quite deep, however, a bit uneven. Throughout ASEAN, if we're looking at industries and segments that are more mature, industry and businesses that have more steady cash flow or even have assets as collateral, I would say credit penetration has been quite good throughout ASEAN.
Okay.
However, there are some areas where, at least from the banking perspective, it's been more uneven. Take, for example, early stage growth companies. We at CIMB, more often we always get companies still in the innovation growth stage that is not deriving, sufficient cash flow to service any debt obligations. I mean, in that scenario, it's very difficult for a bank to extend credit given that we have an obligation to our depositors. Another area where credit penetration is uneven, I would say, is in the underserved segment, both in terms of retail as well as non-retail micro SMEs. It has improved over the last few years with banks embarking on the digital phase. CIMB included, we invested a lot in ourselves, either via our mobile wallet Touch and Go, where 2 out of 3 Malaysians uses it today. We also invested a lot in our mobile app Octo, and we are going to launch a similar app for SMEs and businesses later this week. So those type of digital solutions have managed to reach the underserved segment better, but it's still very uneven and a lot more needs to be done. With regards to the segments that are more mature, I mentioned earlier companies with a track record or even sufficient assets to pose as collateral, we need to do a lot more innovation. Banks have been generally very traditionalist. Whenever SMEs want to get financing, the first question is, do you have a collateral? But not everyone will have the benefit of having collateral. And that is one area that we in CIMB is innovating to see how we can provide financing based on cash flow. We launched a product in Singapore not very long ago called Flexi Cash, where we look at SMEs' cash balances with CIMB. And then we use a model to see how much loans we can provide.
But this is so important because the modern businesses are unlike the traditional ones where you may not have collateral, by the way. So this new product innovation can really help some of the businesses grow faster, right?
Correct, absolutely. So these are areas where banks will need to start to innovate. We're going to launch something very soon in Malaysia. Later this week, we're going to launch our Octobase, which is our mobile app, but used for businesses. It's going to make the banking experience for SMEs and non-retail customers extremely joyful. And we're looking forward to also launch a new financial product to meet the needs of businesses that do not have collateral. So I mean, we at CIMB were extremely excited about it. We've seen how that has worked in Singapore, where we've launched that just about a month and a half ago. So stay tuned. Yeah.
Fantastic. So clearly the macro is good and there's more demand. So essentially there's a great growth story there, right? But Jenny, over to you. Despite this growth story, right, the funding in Southeast Asia in private markets has dropped consistently since 2021, especially, right? Why do you think is the case? I mean, what are the challenges faced by investors? Why aren't they investing, essentially?
Yeah, hi everyone. Very happy to be here. Just very quickly, right? So 25 years of history, Granite Asia. And we started on the equity side, really looking at where are the great founders, where are the great businesses, where are the great business models across the world. And we do play multi-stage, early growth, and then of course when they go public, we help them to go public. We have a tech transformation angle. Now, when you said, so over the last 25 years, we have, as a firm, created over 120 unicorns, 60 plus IPOs, with 16 IPOs in pipeline. These are companies that are in the probably $300 million revenue stage, various stages of EBITDA positive and growing with a tech transformation angle. And I think it's important because the world is being changed, whether whether it's geopolitics, whether it's population dynamics, whether it's aging population, that's being changed. And then we have the question of AI coming in to transform and create new business models. And so, Vishal, coming to your question. So when we come back and said, you can make money in US, you can make money in China, homogeneous market. I was in China for 25 years. And when you look at a market and you say you want to make money in 5 years in venture, that's just too short. But when you have a 25 years lens, you can afford to go deeper into, does this region have the right entrepreneurs, the right ecosystem, the right capital structure, and actually the right to win, to actually create outcomes. Great companies will then create very good outcomes. And so we ask ourselves the question, right? Obviously, if you look at all the historical stats, Southeast Asia hasn't produced, or ASEAN hasn't produced the level of great outcomes that we like to see. But all that changed. I want to highlight this because I met Dr. Chu, Dato Chu in Penang almost end of last year, right? Because I always ask the question, so in every country, beyond the policies, beyond the economy, where are the entrepreneurs? And after I went to Penang, after I met with a bunch of entrepreneurs, so we were in various cities. We were in KL, we were in Johor, we were in Penang. But I just want to cite, because Dr. Chu is sitting next to me, I think that Malaysia has hope. And I think ASEAN has hope. Because at the heart of great companies lie great entrepreneurs. And the trait of great entrepreneurs is that they are resilient, they will fight. Even when there's no capital, they will fight because they have a vision. Whether it's companies or countries, we all need to have a vision. And today, in worlds where the old rules are gone, rules are being rewritten, it's even more important to have a vision, right? And so actually, I want to go back and say, yes, maybe the last 10 years, last 20 years, the region hasn't been prolific. And we can go back, history and analyze. But actually, it's more important to look at going forward, right? And going forward, I think we are seeing, as a global firm, we are seeing reconnection. While the world, US and China, the largest market, are bifurcating in different ways, clusters are being formed. And those clusters within ASEAN is forming quicker than I've ever seen in the last 20 years. I was in Johor and we were talking about, Johor-Singapore collaboration. I was in Doha last week. We were talking about Middle East GCC, connecting through ASEAN, connecting into China. We were in China and China was saying, FDI, we're coming out to invest, because it's not just about trying to sell products, it's also about bringing that capital to help to kind of reconnect this region. So things are changing. Number one, markets are changing. That means market access, the way we know it, are being redefined. That's number one. Number two, and we can talk about this, which is an issue, historically, not having a home market, a public exchange to close the loop from early stage innovation growth into public, and then having that money recycled back into the system, having your great unicorns anchored here, listed here, instead of in the US bringing their talent out, actually is important. Silicon Valley is great because they have a closed loop ecosystem in the US, where the public pension fund invests, the entrepreneurs get listed, the money comes back. Today, or historically, what's happening is all the sovereign wealth here, or investment family office, they invest in the US. If you hug the index, you should be 70% US. And so naturally, it's natural because that's where returns was obtained in mature economies. And if you have large asset to allocate, that's the natural piece. So we're not saying don't do the 70%, but we're saying, maybe be a bit more thoughtful about, do we want this region to grow? All of us have a vested interest. And if we do, actually, I think we are seeing that, is there possibility to close the loop for ASEAN exchange? And I think we can talk more about that. Yeah. So yes, it's true, returns were not great, but as the ever optimist, I have another 30 years. I think we can make another China out of ASEAN.
Fantastic. Yeah, I mean, and investing in the markets here will also help with the liquidity, and we'll talk about that in a bit. So, Dato, when Vitrox started in 1990s, it was a challenging economic environment, to say the least, right? Especially post the Asian financial crisis. Now, from your vantage point, right, what are the challenges that you faced? And how did you frame the risk of starting something new? Like, what went through your mind to do that?
Thank you. Hi, everyone. Yeah, let's start about Vitrox. In 1995, I have a chance to pay a visit to Silicon Valley because I work for Hewlett Packard, Penang, and they sent me for a meeting. Then I took a chance to visit an HP garage. That's where two Stanford graduates studying EE, after listening to the advice from the lecturers not to join big multinational companies in the East Coast at that time, but to start something small in California. And the rest is history. These two gentlemen started from a garage and grew to become one of the greatest technology companies in the world. And that moment really inspired me. And then I thought, I'm also a graduate in EE. If they can make it, why I can't? So I planted a seed in my heart at that time that giving opportunity, if I go back to Malaysia, I want to build a great technology company in Malaysia by Malaysians. I want to make by Malaysian products. That was 30 years ago. And today we know that the relative is that Malaysia want to transform from make in Malaysia to make by Malaysia. But we have started that 20 over years ago. So to go back to your questions, when the opportunity came in the late 90s, when ex-colleague asked us to build a vision system, I thought my opportunity came. So I just left. Knowing that I'm going to get a business if I successfully build the first products. I don't look at the economies, I don't look at many other things. I just saw that I have a chance to build a great technology company. So we work extremely hard. I let go my good income from my MNCs, and I look at my bank account, I only have 3,000. With 3,000 bringing out to start a business. So luckily, I borrowed money from my wife, family, and friends, and with 20,000, I started everything from my bedroom, and today the company worth about 8 billion ringgit. We go through a lot of challenges. Thank you. I think the first challenge is on talent. Who want to work for a startup at that time where I operate my company from Penang, where you will see so many big multinational companies. They took almost all our top talents in the countries. And also, I have to fight the way out. So what I did, again, I have no money, I have no technology. I have a little bit about technology, but I don't have the brand. But I just shared about my vision. A vision that one day Malaysia probably can build a great technology companies. And I talked to 100 people, few hundred people, only few of them believe that. And this few of them now become a multi-billionaire. So I stop it here first. Thank you.
Oh, what a story. Thank you, Dato. We need more Dato choose, but maybe with less struggle, I hope.
No, the struggle is part of it. Without struggle,
also,
you cannot go to 80 billion.
Yeah.
That's your target.
That's also
Next.
true. Yeah. So shifting gears a bit, right? So the FDIs are a major part of this journey, right? And Novan, over to you. There has been multiple material FDIs in the past, right? And however, it has not effectively translated into innovations, IP, and scale-up players, right? What do you think was missing? What did we miss in the past, right? In a general sense.
I mean, it's a good question because this links back to the macro-micro mismatch where, we have all the macro, but for some reason it's not translating into capital market value. I would divide this into two components. The first bucket is, when we attracted FDI in the past, and when I mean we as ASEAN, it was due to that point in time, the conditions in that point in time where we did not have much capital. We were probably not the consumers of the world, but we had cheap labor. And therefore, ASEAN was set up as production centers. And we attracted a lot of FDIs, a lot of MNCs, like where Dato Chu first worked. And that has benefited us. It created a multiplier effect. It inspired Dato Chu to set up Vitrox, which is now an 8 billion ringgit market cap company. But because it was set up as a production center, the benefit went back to HQ. So it does the production, it interco back to headquarters. Headquarters is where the company is listed, and it reaped the benefits of capital markets back in the headquarters. So therefore, you would see that although a lot of the hard work is done here in Southeast Asia, the benefit of the multiple expansion was derived back in HQ where the interco happened. But that is fine because that was what we needed at that point in time. And it did generate the multiplier effect and, you know, Dato Chu's and other entrepreneurs. But I think moving forward, as what Jenny mentioned, things are now changing. We now have the capital. In fact, you know, emerging markets are lending money to the United States by buying treasuries, and the United States is using our money to buy products from us. So we are doing the work, we're also lending money so the US can buy products from us. Things have changed. We now have capital. We are also now one of the largest global consumer markets. So there's no reason now for FDIs to be structured purely as a cost center here in Southeast Asia, where it intercoes back to headquarters, and headquarters does all the sales, and headquarters book all the profits, and headquarters get the capital market gain.
Right.
So the recipe and the structure for FDIs then need to change. You know, we then need to, I mean, we have a lot of liquidity. You know, a lot of our asset managers are investing abroad, to your point, hugging the index and making decent returns. Nothing wrong with that. But this is where now we, the asset managers here, need to allocate some capital, partner local champions like Dato Chu, and then take that to the next level. And eventually go to the capital markets and IPO, and we'll start having our knowledge companies and technology companies and innovation companies on the capital markets. We need to do that.
Interesting.
And we're not short of recent successes. I mean, Khazanah has been extremely successful partnering local entrepreneurs in Farm Fresh, for example. Time.com is one more. CIMB, I mean, I mentioned disrupted ourselves by coming up with Touch and Go many years ago, but we partnered Ant Financial.
Yes.
We wouldn't have scaled up such to the point where every 2 out of 3 Malaysians are using Touch and Go if we did not have the Ant Financial technology and platform.
Absolutely.
So we have seen a number of these recent successes, and I'm extremely confident that the structure that we're putting in today will benefit us. I mean, we heard about Jelawang Capital. We know about what Kuap is doing on the private equity space. So I'm actually extremely confident that we can pivot to the next level.
Yeah, fantastic. And similar on the FDI point, Dato Chu, what is your view from an E&E perspective? Because I know Malaysia received a lot of FDI in the 80s and 90s, right? And again, similar question in a very specific E&E sense. Could we have done something better to get more IP and tech? Why aren't there more Dato Chus in short, right? So just your perspective.
Yeah, in my humble opinions, we have missed out big opportunities when during 80s, 90s, when the FDI is actually flowing in a big way. We focused too much about capex and headcounts as the cheap labels, regions where we didn't take up the opportunity for more value creation, things like technology transfer. We don't have a good mechanisms to make sure that while the MNCs are here, we make sure that a certain part of the technology would be transferred to local companies so that they can have a better spillover effect, they can build a strong local ecosystems. I think that is one. I think we can do better on technology transfer through the policy. There are too little of local content. Even we have so many multinational companies here, they have enjoying a lot of benefits and incentive. But then, if you drill down, you look at how much local contents that they actually used in most of the MNC, specifically in the semiconductor electronics, you will probably find that is pretty low, despite the fact that now we are the number 6 largest semiconductor exporters. And I think 1 year probably the export value would be 500 to 600 billion ringgit. But if you really look at the value added, probably about 100 billion, 100 to 150 billion, which is only 20-30%. But if you compare that with Taiwan, which is 40-50%, compared to Korea, probably even higher, because they have the IP. We don't have, we just low-cost manufacturing. So I think the third point that I think this is missing is that somehow our university have been taught and drive and focused to produce good employees, good workers, so that they can help to solve problems in the factories. They have missed out to grow entrepreneurship and graduates that willing to take risks. Last few days, I just talked to someone from Khazanah, and they told me that in MIT, entrepreneurship is their religious. Every graduate from MIT want to start up a business or work for startups. But should you ask our graduates in Malaysia, probably you get a very different answer. They want to work for multinational companies. So probably this is something that we are missing, because the whole country's mechanisms are going towards how to create more jobs at that time, produce more engineers or workers that can fulfill that needs. But I think now is the time to change. How can we able to capitalize and seize the once of a generation's opportunities that present to us in ASEAN, to turn that around? How can we treat the FDI by then making sure that this FDI would are able to build the DTI and create more global champions for Malaysia, from make in Malaysians to make by Malaysians.
Yeah, thank you. And that flywheel will then inspire other entrepreneurs and, and so on and so forth, right? So it's a very important point. Thank you. And so, Jenny, you spoke about the whole ecosystem earlier. But let's just focus on the startup ecosystem in ASEAN, right? How do you think it's doing? Is it achieving its true potential, right? And if not, why?
Vishal, maybe before that, can I also add to the FDI question? Actually, I think that if you looking at FDI by itself is a very static matrix, which is not representative of the true value add or value creation in an economy. So when we talk about ecosystem build, actually it has to be complete, right? It's a systems that is all encompassing, from talent, people, to job creation, to technology, to infrastructure. And perhaps if I can use just a little bit of time to share a story. So when I first went to China in 2000, I asked the general population, I said, what is the coolest technology company in the country? And someone said, oh, go look at the factory that does bicycle parts manufacturing. That's the coolest because it's manufacturing. And then, very interestingly, shortly after 03, 04, China started to have what they call high-tech software parks. Because China realized that if the entire population is just building bicycles for the world, they're not going to get very far. In fact, all the streets, if you go to China in the early days, the streets were already flooded with their own bicycles. So then what happened? It was a whole of systems approach where the government went to different zones and said, you be a software park, you be an IT park. And then what do? They said, if you hire, then they go to Microsoft, go to Intel and said, now, if you want to do business in the country, please hire 4,000 guys who does software coding, right? And then the 4,000 guys who is hired into a certain high-tech park gets 30% salary rebate. And so it's basically an integrated one. Right? The companies have to move some work, development work, coding work into China. In so doing, hire and train people. And the government says, I will subsidize you a little bit, right, in this case. Very soon, I've visited all the major software and tech parks from Dalian to Beijing to Wuxi to Shanghai just to see how they started. And very soon, the school said, schools, all of you, we need more engineers. We don't need more workers. So the curriculum was changed so that there was this whole consideration of STEM and people were learning coding, right? And so they shifted, and it's an interesting case because when we talk about ecosystem, Sometimes we just identify the components, but actually it's not just it's a all in package component that encompasses policies, incentive, bringing, quick B companies to come in to lend, right? And today, I think if they didn't start on their journey in 03, 04, we wouldn't have the so-called DeepSeek moment in AI in February of this year, right? Because over the last 20 years, they then trained a whole generation where annual graduates in STEM is like 4 to 5 million every year in China. India is about 2 million, right? US probably like 200K, right? And so if you want to build ecosystem, in this case, you have to start with what is the building block, and actually it starts with people. Because only when you have people and talent across the board in the ecosystem, that's when the money comes in, they will lend, they will bring in the jobs, and the jobs will stay. And then it goes from just coding or doing testing to now AI modeling, right? So that's one example. And so again, I think as we think about how to ecosystem build in ASEAN, as I always said, the world is bifurcated. Technology, what do we want to do as a region around AI compute, around AI safety? What do we want to do as a region around automation? Because we have aging population that's coming in, agentic AI trying to empower machines. Asia has natural advantage. We have the VTrucks of the world with manufacturing hardware. Can we now then create, the next generation in terms of smarter AI manufacturing and components? Another one. And then I give another further example, quantum. Right, quantum computing, we think this is a technology where only the rich and the large countries should do. But this is fundamental in defense. And today in defense, you need a home bias, meaning that every country needs to know what is your bargaining chip on the table when you talk. It could be as simple as hybrid wire bonding, for high-end semiconductor chip, or it could be I have a component of quantum compute or quantum communication. It could be in algorithms. And so I want to give that example because, sometimes people just think about ecosystem as hardware manufacturing. It's not. It goes from software, bits, bytes, to machines, to AI. But because the world is reconfiguring, the ASEAN as a country has certain components. Maybe not all the components are in one country, but can we sit down and say, around data, around protection, like certain areas that we can do. So I want to triangulate that because we see that the only reason to build more great companies is not every VTrucks trying to create their own ecosystem. Is you need a lot of baby VTrucks, right? That can actually take up and down the entire ecosystem. And that's where the talent will grow. That's how Silicon Valley was born. People will jump shop, but you can hire them back next time when they have new startup, right? So I would say, I think that's really one. And then I think maybe the segue, Vishal, in your question is, again, coming back to what does it take for the region? In summary, of course, is connecting the market. If we can connect the market and make it easy for entrepreneurs to move and hire, why do you need to be in one country if your talent is across the region? With COVID, everybody knows that the technology is available for online work. Right, I think with compute in the cloud, it's even more viable. So how do we connect people beyond our own borders? How do we connect markets? And I want to highlight this. While ASEAN talked about ASEAN integration, my view is ASEAN integration is not sufficient. And maybe in this case, I'll combine market with capital markets. Right. So if you combine all the ASEAN exchanges, SGX, Bursa in Thailand, the market cap of ASEAN exchange is only about the same size as Hong Kong. Hong Kong is 10 times individual market. Hong Kong is 1/10 that of NASDAQ. Now you're talking about 100 times. So even if ASEAN come together, we just want Hong Kong. Right, this year, I think there are investors in the audience. Hong Kong Exchange now has gotten about 70 IPOs done year to date. 260 more companies in pipeline, in application process for the rest of the 4 months, right? Companies already falling to go public. While people are not saying the IPO market is back, US is still not back, India has its own, Japan has its own, Hong Kong is actually coming back very quickly. And so when we think about ASEAN exchange, I would also encourage that we try and integrate ASEAN, not just within ASEAN, but interconnect into markets on the north, the China, Japan, Korea, markets down to the south. Now, it's not an easy question. It probably takes many years or hours. But again, I think that there's an impetus that if we can connect that, I think the entrepreneurship, the capital, not just within the region, international capital flow will come back. Maybe just one slight last point. I recently had an IPO in one of our portfolio company, went to Hong Kong 3 months ago, got listed, started at about $3 billion in market cap. It's now up 70% in the last 3 months. So it's about a $5 billion market cap company today. I ask, where are the investors? Where are the investors? Is this the Asia guys buying? Is this the China guys buying? Answer is very interesting. At the IPO, 13 times institutional demand oversubscribed. Retail, 130 times. And I said, so if you take away retail, of the 13 times institutional, actually 2/3 of the money came from international, right? Of which there were hedge funds, long-only funds, European anchor, people coming into Asia. And so is it possible to attract capital back into the region? Actually, the answer is yes. But it needs the right company. And this particular company, 80% of their revenue is international. Right? So from Asia to the world, if the region comes together, I am positive that it can be done.
Okay, thank you. And the other two, you mentioned what role we played in the semiconductor industry, right? But from semiconductors to AI, ASEAN is part of the global supply chain for sure, right? But arguably, it's probably capturing a smaller profit pool, right? What are the challenges for local firms to climb up the value chain and capture a more profitable part of the value chain, right?
I will talk about 3 things.
Yeah.
I think the first is probably on talent. As local companies, we have to. Malaysia is a small country. We only have about 35 million population. It's like Taiwan. Yeah. But most of our so-called top talents are working for foreign companies. So for local companies to strive to move up the value chain, we need to do a lot of R&D. We need smart people. So the challenge is how to attract those smart people to work on something that longer terms, but probably with a slightly lower salary compared to MNC. So that is a challenge that we need to address. So as far as Vitrox is concerned, of course, we give them a meaningful job, a great vision. Of course, we also pay on par with MNC. We want to get a great talent. Without great talent, we can't move far because most of our customers are big multinational companies. We export 85% of our products over the world. US contribute about 10%. Taiwan, China, about 50%. So we got to be very competitive, but we got to spend a lot of money on the R&D side. And it takes years in order to get the products out to the market. So the patient risk capitals, long-term investments is important. But as a listed company, you have a lot of pressure. You put too much money on things that will not see returns in the next quarter or 2 quarters, you'll be questioned. So that probably is on the challenge side. So I think the second challenge is I would say the government policies. Yeah. How the government policy can come into more efforts and intensifies the efforts so that more local companies would be able to have the bandwidth, the money to invest. Especially for R&D company, when I look at the incentive side, this investment tax allowance, they actually look at capex. How big is your factories that make products? How many people they hire? But they don't really look at how much you spend on R&D. So I think these are the old incentives that need to be revamped in order to make sure that we attract more companies to really put more money into R&D. And without R&D, we cannot come up with high-value products.
Can I jump in with something?
Please, yes.
I'm not on the board of Vitrox, so we're only friends. So if I'm on his board, that's what I will ask him. I'll say, Dr. Chu, what do you want to do? Can the company be 10x from here? Can this be 80 billion? Right? And of course, the company has to go and figure out where we are. Is there a path in the ecosystem that I can 10x? And 10x in real terms, meaning that not just market cap, but your revenue needs to grow, your profit needs to grow, maybe your technology, you have an idea, roadmap, where that needs to go. And there will naturally, I can expect the answer, organic growth and inorganic growth, right? Organic growth will require you talent, building your product, R&D. Inorganic growth will say, well, if I want to have technology, now you're in 3D, okay, just 5D, for example, right? A super radar vision, or 4D. But I need to acquire. And there's licenses out there, there's technology in Europe, there's something else out there, I know it's there, but I cannot go buy. That's an inorganic path. That roadmap needs to be on the table, right? And said, okay, then you come back and say, what's your means? But I also hear Hisham's speech in his concluding speech in his last panel. And he said that if you don't take risks, you haven't lived. If you don't take risks, you wouldn't know what's possible. So take this plan to Hisham and his team and say, make an exception. Because to build unicorns, you need exceptions. You cannot have cookie cutter rules for everyone, right? And said, do you buy in? Because with the right support, this will be your national champion. And therefore, I would do it another way, because if you do cookie cutter, you will average to the mean. But if you have already emerged leaders, you have to help your little queen ant can build a bigger anthill. But it needs a consolidated effort.
Yeah. Fantastic.
And sorry for all of you, I'm actually Singaporean. But I love the region and I love entrepreneurs.
We didn't know. Thank you.
I will invite you to our board. So,
And you will get questions, so that will be my question.
I love challenge. But by the way, yes, I think, I don't know how many X that we're going to grow, but I think in Vitrox, or at least in my view, we hope that we can build more Vitrox. So the ecosystem side. So I'm actually look beyond just about how big Vitrox can grow, but how can I build an ecosystem just like the Silicon Valley, where many engineers will want to come out and start their own business because they see that they can become unicorns. They see that there are supporting infrastructures, monies, talents, even the customers and industries are around. So that's what I hope to build in the next 30 years.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Great.
Thank you. Right. So shifting gears a bit, let's talk about the opportunities, right? Little pockets of opportunities. So Novan, over to you. What role do you envisage banks can play in the future growth of ASEAN? Like you mentioned a little bit about this earlier, uneven growth and all. So what are the gaps that you see that CIMB can sort of plug for the future growth?
So I see two things. One, as a capital provider, and we need to do better because as a capital provider today, we are lending to more mature companies with stable businesses, with assets as collateral. But we need to innovate in order to fund more of these growth companies like Dato 10 years ago. Now he got sufficient capital. Not enough, okay. Second is as an intermediary. In fact, I would now want after this to go and speak to Dato Chu and Hisham and advise on a Khazanah investment into Vitrox together with the Temasek investment as Jenny and both Hisham goes on the board of Dato Chu. So Dato Chu, CIMB would like to be your advisor in this.
All right. That's how you create national champions.
We'll also provide capital. And we had a great discussion in Langkawi. I was extremely inspired by your story. So yeah, Vishal, as an intermediary, clearly a lot that CIMB and other banks can also play. But then I want to also rewind back. While we want to play a role, the points that Jenny mentioned, two things I picked up from what you mentioned. One is ASEAN is very, in a way, many different countries with different regulations, different capital requirements, different laws to move people. The capital markets are very segregated. Even consolidated is still smaller than or the same size as Hong Kong, which is 1/10 the size of the US. And that all need to be addressed as well. that all need to be addressed as well. As a business operator ourselves, I mean, CIMB, we're in 10 countries. While we have improved a lot over the last many years, it does still feel like we're operating multi-local companies. You know, we have a big presence in Indonesia, we have in Malaysia, obviously, we have in Singapore, we have in Thailand, Philippines, Vietnam, Hong Kong, Shanghai. It feels like we're operating many multi-local companies. So certainly, a lot more integration within ASEAN would be important. So more integration across the markets, allow us to move capital and human capital a lot more freely, and then also a lot more consolidation on the capital markets. That's important, especially in the current environment where it's all about passive ETF and investments. It's all about scale. And if you're so segregated, you don't have scale. Yes. And we need that also addressed. But as a banker, we're going to bring in Khazanah and Temasek into Vitrox. We're going to 10x the value to 80 billion. It'll be the next large cap company on Bursa. Okay.
I represent Granite Asia. Actually, can I also add one point?
Please.
So I am actually quite positive on credit in ASEAN. Right? While we talk about native tech companies growing from 0 to 1 to public, I actually think that 2/3 of the economy, maybe even more, 80% of the economy, is composed of small, medium-sized growth businesses. And in this region, we have seen really traditional businesses. You call them traditional just because they are not the .com, but actually they are value creating. Some are growing 30, 40% year-on-year growth, profitable. Now, these companies are going through generational changes to their second, third generation. The young guys taking over in their mid-30s, early 40s. And what's very important is today, there's also a tech transformation, right? How do you now convert a 3,000 man company that's doing packaging, snacks packaging, into a maybe 300 companies with machines on the back end, you know, TikTok and Red Note selling your product. So the technology transformation there, that knowledge is also very important. And so we actually do feel that in Asia, there is room for really hybrid credit or credit with a value creation angle that really can come to help these companies. They don't really need money because they are growing. They have figured out access, maybe their offline retail or regionalized business. But today they're going through a transformation where they said, our DNA is not tech. And tech is, I do believe 10 years down the road, we look back and said AI was underestimated, not bubble, because I'm seeing true transformation in companies that's using AI. And so the same question then is, how do we now support this core set of companies? And I think credit is the right way. So I really applaud what CIMB is doing. You know, how do you now extend this into bringing companies to lend into Malaysia becomes very important, because the supply chain is also being reconstructed. And if there's a way to work with the private markets guy, we can underwrite the risk, because we know how to underwrite, you know, founders' businesses. And to be fair, they're not very risky given they're all, you know, pretty big mid-sized companies as well. And so, but how do you then leverage this other piece of capital solutions to help the other portion of the country grow? I think it's very important as well. So I really applaud the different initiative.
Yeah.
It may not be 10x, but hopefully 15% IRR.
Yeah. Well, thank you. And talk about a pitch, Novan. Well done, man. So one of my favorite topics now, Jenny, is about exit risks in ASEAN markets, right? How can, we know there are issues, but how can participants, like including funds, policymakers, government officials, improve exit liquidity, which will help catalyze the VCP industry as a whole, right? Because only if only if you see liquidity, you will see good outcomes, which will then encourage everybody else to invest in the ecosystem across the board. So how
Yeah, I think, you know, this one we talked quite a bit before. I think it's a two-pole issue. It's not a liquidity issue. Well, it's not just a liquidity issue. It's also the quality of issuer issue, right? So today, if we only saw any exchange, if you only said, okay, the sovereign wealth is going to come in, international capital is going to come in on existing exchange, you create ETF, you create more products, derivative products. Well, the end result is all that capital is going to go to the top 1% of the company. In Singapore will be the DBS, the Singtel, you know, in Malaysia, probably the VTrucks of the world, right? So the top 1%. But the reality is all the exchanges here, we've studied the exchange, over 2/3 or 70% are companies trading at below 100 million market cap. And I said US dollar market cap, some are even below, right? So while liquidity is one pole and we have to make the companies more well-known, transform through M&As, transform to cap table restructuring. I think all that work needs to be done on listed, but the other effort has to be on improving the quality of the issuer. And I always like to say, we need to have many Taylor Swift of the world for IPOs. Because that will bring the eyeball, the attraction, the capital flow will then come back. So the Queen Bee concept. And that perhaps is supporting your own Queen Bee to go out and then build more. And only when that quality becomes 20% of an exchange, not 1 or 2%, I think that's when the closed loop would happen.
Thank you.
So more private capital support. I know private equity and venture is a worst asset class right now because people feel like 10 years, 15 years, not liquid. But this is what every country needs to do if we want innovation to stay in the region.
Thank you.
Sorry, that's a pitch for our business.
Yes, I agree with her. Yes. So moving on to you, Dato, you believe in talent as well as you have developed with Whitrix College, right? One may say that we have an amazing economic backdrop now, but do you think we have the right talent? You've spoken about it earlier as well, to unlock the economic potential that we have, right? Do local ecosystem, which is universities, R&D, venture capital, et cetera, provide the right conditions for a globally competitive innovation?
Allow me to, because I think I didn't manage to answer the previous questions about the challenge for the local firms. The third one that I said is that on the demand side. And you'll find something very challenging for the small local firms because first thing they face is to get customers. Very difficult if they do not have a very world-class products. But we need to support those small local companies. Even VTrucks as a slightly bigger companies, if we want to sell products to GLC, it's also extremely difficult. Just take one example. Our AOI, AXI, 4D, 3D, XI have been actually used in factories of BYD, in Geely, but we can't go into Proton. So my point is that if our GLC are willing to take up some percentage of the capex to support local companies, I think there would be a big boost. This is what probably Hashin mentioned just now. It will be a big boost to become the customers of local company and then bring them to the next level. I think this is what China's are doing last 10, 20 years. Well, when iPhone manufacturers in China, they give everything to Apple, but then with the conditions that you have a local content. And the government will come in to support the local company. Whatever it takes, you build a product for Apple. The government will put in the money to grow the local companies, and that's how it flourished. And that same thing happened to EV as well. So go back to Whitrix College. Why we want to start Whitrix College? To solve two problems. Eventually, it become a research university. This is what we want to nurture more competent talents. But we see two problems. The first is that the graduates are not ready for the work. They are taught with the old tools, old knowledge, but the world changed very fast, especially in tech. But Whitrix College provides something very unique. The first year student really work alongside engineers, solving real problems using the latest tools and technologies. So that would actually bring them up to work very quickly. The second is on the mindset. As I mentioned earlier, we want to create an environment where they think that they can change the world. They can make a difference, the entrepreneurship side. And they see me every day. They see all our engineers every day. So that is something that we are trying to advocate and trying to build using Whitrix College. Yes, I think we have the talents, but we have a limited top talent. So we really have to make full use of that top talents. If you look at Broadcom, who is the Broadcom CEO? This is from Malaysia, Hock Tan, and many others. But how can we make sure that we are able to get all these top talents to come together to work for some collective purpose and objective? Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Now, we don't have time because our next session, I think, is going to happen soon. But one last question for everyone. We heard some great suggestions, right? So if you had to pick one suggestion to tell investors, policymakers, basically the ecosystem, to sort of align the growth story with returns and also encourage more entrepreneurs in the region, what would it be? We'll go just one by one, maybe starting, Dato, with you.
Yeah, I think I echo what William mentioned. This is the second takeoff. We should not miss the opportunity by moving up the value chain to create our global champions. I think this is the time. So we really need to move from depending on the local manufacturing to move up to do more R&D, supporting more local content, local champions so that they become a global champions. In other words, we collectively work towards make by Malaysian products. Thank you.
Thank you, Dato.
Well, my wish list, if I have one, is again ASEAN integration on the exchange. I know this topic was talked about many years, didn't quite work. I hope that it can be revisited, particularly by the regulators in the room to come in, but go beyond just ASEAN, and hopefully we can integrate North and South as well.
Thank you, Jenny.
Yeah, I would go in terms of let's celebrate ASEAN MNCs. I mean, we've been giving a lot of incentives for global MNCs, but let's celebrate ASEAN MNCs. There is something that we are advocating by the ASEAN Business Advisory Council. That's the ASEAN Business Entity concept. If you are defined as an ASEAN business entity, then we make it easier for capital to move across businesses in Southeast Asia, easier for human capital to move, easier for data. So that is something that I would ask for.
Fantastic. Ladies and gentlemen, please give a big round of applause to our panelists.